Okay, here is your Chapter 14 End Quiz. And the first one says classify the real number, and you have to list all that apply. Irrational, rational, integer, whole, natural. Well, the first thing you have to do here is realize that this is a perfect square. So, negative square root of 16 is really negative 4. Negative 4 falls into two of these categories. Two of these categories. I'm not going to tell you which ones. Here, number 2, this includes pi. And when it includes pi, it almost always falls into only one of these categories. The only exception I can think of is if it were an expression where you multiplied pi by 0, therefore taking pi out of the expression, or had pi on top and bottom here, again, where they would cancel each other out. But when you see pi in here, it indicates it belongs to only one of these categories. And number 3, we realize now that we can write these repeating decimals as a fraction or ratio. That makes this fall into one of these categories. Only one of these categories will that fall into. So to recap, this is 2 of them, this is 1 of them, and this is 1 of them as far as these categories go. Number 4, estimate the square root of 37. Well, we know the square root of 37 falls between 36, which is 6 times 6, and 49, which is 7 times 7. So it's going to be one of these, either 6 or 7, whichever one it is closest to. If 37 is closer to 36, then it's 6. If it's closer to 49, then it's 7. I'll let you figure that one out. Over here, because the square root of 37 was so much closer to 6 than 7, then when we do this one, I would recommend starting by trying 6.1. If 6.1 times 6.1, or 6.1 squared, is higher than 37, well, then we know it's going to be between 6.1 and 6. If it's lower than 37, then we know it's going to be between 6.1 and 6.2. Well, actually, 6.1 squared equals 37.21. So this is on the high end. We go down a tenth, and I'm going to go down a tenth down here, 6.0. We know 6.0 is just 36. It's 6.0 squared, of course. So now we have to think, is the square root of 37, so is 37 closer to 37.21 or 36? Whichever one it's closer to, you choose that number out here. I'll let you finish that one up. Number 6. Which number is greater, and explain? Well, although we do know that the square root of 17 falls between 16 and 25, which is 5 squared, we have to choose. We know that it's closer to 16, which means it's not right in the middle, it's closer. Well, 4.5 is right in the middle. So if the square root of 17 is closer to 4 than it is 5, we know it's less than 4.5. So you choose which one of these is greater, knowing that that is less than that. Number 7, same kind of problem. We'll go to, now these are on the negative side, so be careful when we're all done here. But the square, we'll go the negative square root of 120 is going to be negative square root 100, negative square root 121. So 10 squared is 100. 11 squared is 121. 120 is much closer to 121. So it's going to be closer to 11 than 10, much closer to 11. So this will be something like negative 10.9 to the nearest tenth. you have to figure out which one is greater. Remember, on the negative side of things, the closer to 0, the greater the number. Number 8 down here, we can use that little trick where we know that just one digit repeating after the decimal is that digit over a certain number. And here, 2 digits going past the decimal like this repeating is that number over a certain number. Do simplify those for your answer. Here, find the distance between these 2 points. Of course, we will use the distance formula. I'll write it right here in the middle of these. Distance equals the square root x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So when we do that over here, we get that the distance is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1, 5 minus negative 3, so 5 plus 3, which is 8, and 8 squared is 64. y2 minus y1, negative 9 minus 6 is negative 15. Squared will be a positive 225. We'll add these up and get square root of 289. And 289 is nothing. Hold on here. What about 17 times 17? Oh! I'm not going to tell you what the answer is, but that is a perfect square. So make sure that you finish that up by finding what times itself gives you 289. That'll be your answer here. Number 11, same kind of problem. So the distance equals the square root of 3 minus negative 2, which is 5, because 3 plus 2 is 5. Squared is 25. Plus negative 1 minus 7 would be negative 8 squared, which is 64. The distance here equals the square root of 89. And that cannot be simplified, so that would be the answer that you look for. Moving down to number 12 here. Tell whether the triangle with the given side lengths is a right triangle. Well, here you see the triangle. Here you do not. Seeing the triangle is not that important. We just need to know if a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Remember, c squared has to be the longest of the line segments or the sides. So we have for this one, I'll do it over here. 4 squared plus 17 squared, and we want to know, does that equal 18 squared? So you'll square these and add them and see if it equals to that. Over here, same kind of problem. We know that 17 is the longest here, so we have 8 squared plus 15 squared, and we want to know, does that equal what 17 squared is? If it is, then that's yes, it's a right triangle. And if that's a no, then it's no, it's not a right triangle. And finally, the last problem here, distance formula. Now, I said we wouldn't have one of these like this on the quiz, and what I meant was we're not going to have to convert it by finding this is to the nearest tenth of whatever. Here we can just use these side lengths, these legs of our right triangle. This is 3, so 3 squared, because we know a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 3 squared here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squared here equals our c squared, which will be this distance right here, d. So 9 plus 25 equals c squared. We'll add these together to get 34 equals c squared. We take the square root of each side, and our answer would be, if we take the square root of each side, we get c equals the square root of 34. Have an awesome day.